We got someone in the car traveling from A to B. Very nice.
So welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this this webinar. I'm Deborah Eyre, and I'm the founder and chair at HPL, and I'm joined today by three principals and an HPL lead from some of our existing schools. So I'll just introduce them very briefly. So Nigel Fossey from the Sultan School in Oman, Joanna Paval from Wales International School in Abu Dhabi, Kendall Peat from the British International School Bucharest, and Lee Hawkins, who is the HPL lead in the British International School Bucharest. So the kind of format for this webinar is that I'm just going to really introduce HPL as a concept very, very briefly at the beginning. Many of you may know about it already, and if you don't, we have lots of material that we can send you. But the real purpose of this webinar is for you to be able to hear from existing school principals and from Lee as an HPL lead about how this has actually worked in practice in their schools. Because lots of people are kind of genuinely interested in the concept, but they just don't know how it would go down for them. So this is an opportunity to hear it from the horse's mouth. I suggest that if you've got questions as we go along, you put them in the chat, and we'll try and pick them up on the go. And if we don't manage to pick something up, we'll pick it up at the end. So I'm going to just, kind of start, therefore, and ask my kind of first question as the chair of this kind of panel. And I'm going to ask this question about why did you decide to adopt HPL into your school? And I think you'll find that the reasons are different in different contexts, and that's exactly what we would expect. So let me start first with you, Joanna. Why did you choose HPL?
Yeah, I knew about HPL for a long time. Obviously, Deborah and I have met through COBIS, and I've read all of her books, and the concept of HPL was something that was really close to my heart on many levels. And I took over just over a year and a half ago. I took over a school that probably, if it was in the UK, you would describe it as being under challenging circumstances. And to quote one of my parents, I inherited a disaster. So a lot of people misunderstand the concept of being an HPL school and assume that you need to be an outstanding school already. Our school was in no way, shape or form an outstanding school. And so what I looked at was we had a variety of different teachers from a variety of different countries. I'm based obviously in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. So we had South African teachers, Irish teachers, British teachers, teachers from India, from all over the world. And they were all coming at the education system from different angles. And for me, it was twofold. So it was from a teaching element that it would have one vehicle to move the school forward in the same direction, using the same language and with the same educational philosophy behind it. But similarly, for the children, when I came into the school, I wasn't feeling the love. I wasn't feeling that the kids had any confidence. They really felt at a low, and they didn't feel that they were capable of doing things. And for me, the values and the attitudes and attributes from HPL was something that I wanted for our children. It's important for them to gain confidence. So it was twofold, really. It was, first of all, to get the teaching moving in the right direction, plus it needed to, because we needed to improve the school quite rapidly. And then the other thing was the impact that it would have on the children in terms of their values and attitudes within school. And I have to say, it very rapidly, like I say, I've only been at school, this is my second year, and the impact that HPL has had has been absolutely phenomenal.
Thanks, Joanna. So I'm going to ask Kendall next, because Kendall is in Bucharest and in a very different type of school, not just its location, but just the nature of the school. And you were in a different place, weren't you, Kendall, in terms of making that choice?
Yeah, I think much of what Joanna has said resonates with me. But our situation was different. We were a school that was rated good to outstanding. So I think two inspections ago, our inspection report had 5 good and 3 excellent, or 3 outstanding. And we had already been building as a school with a growth mindset, Carol Dweck, for I think probably almost 5 years. And we were starting to ask the question of where to from here. Our vision statement reads, building a community of passionate lifelong learners. And we were trying to answer the question, what is a lifelong learner? And we'd had some brainstorming inset sessions with our staff where we were had everyone sitting around on tables and writing words, but it didn't seem like it was organized or research based. And we were at a Cobus conference. I'd heard Deborah at an early Cobus conference, I think it was somewhere around 2016. And then I was back at another Cobus conference with Alan Cornish, my head of primary. And again, we heard HPL presenting, and it was really the right time and the right place for us. We wanted to move the school forward. The next best thing for us was really defining our vision statement with more accuracy. HPL gave us the learning competencies, 30 learning competencies that are indicative of a successful lifelong learner. And it was really just given to us on a plate. So we were able to sell it to the staff very easily, because we were basically saying, look, we are in many ways an HPL school, but this gives us a common unifying language. It very clearly stipulates what the 30 competencies of a lifelong learner are. And everyone felt it was the right time and the right place for us. We picked it up. And not only did we go through the 2-year pathway in a way that I felt moved very smoothly, but at the end of that journey, we had our ISI inspection. And for the very first time ever for the school, we were graded outstanding or excellent. So, and I think HPL was very much a part of that journey. I don't know if we would have got there in the same capacity that we did without HPL delivering us to that point. So very grateful to HPL. And we are at a point now where I still feel like we're ground zero. It's not like this is it, we are an HPL school, there's nowhere to go. I really feel each day that it is the start of the journey, and I don't see the horizon, I don't see the end of the journey. And that as a head of a school, I'm not having to think about what next. I feel like HPL is always the answer to what is next, embedding, systematizing, and developing HPL within our curriculum, across the curriculum.
So Nigel, I'm just going to turn to you now. So Nigel has adopted HPL in 3 different schools. So maybe start with your first school, Nigel, and your rationale for that, and then move us through.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you all. And yeah, I mean, it's HPL for me has suited many different contexts on 3 continents. So I first came across HPL some years ago. I knew Deborah, met through Cobus, and for me, HPL always resonated in terms of my own beliefs that every child can achieve high performance. It doesn't matter what their background or prior attainment is. So it came from that growth mindset, as Kendall said, and I think just with Joanna, it is something very personal and very deep, that belief, that growth mindset. And I was quite pragmatic the first time I adopted HPL as a school leader, because I was running King's College in Madrid. And it was an outstanding school, and I'd just taken it over, and I thought, well, how do I take this school beyond outstanding in all areas? It had just had a top rating in the BSO inspection. And I thought, well, if you want to go from outstanding to even better, there has to be a relentless focus on high quality teaching and learning. And that was a way of really unifying the school. It bonded the Spanish teachers, the local teachers with the international teachers. And it was a sort of rallying cry for moving the school forward, and lo and behold, that school gained outstanding in all areas again. So it fulfilled its purpose. And then with King's, I was asked to move to Panama to lead King's College in Panama. It was a school that had some difficulties, quite a lot of instability over in its first years. And rather like Joanna, I'd inherited a school which was in the midst of the pandemic. It was moving to a new campus. The school had been shut down for months. What would bring that school together? And that, rather like with Kendall, it was a good to great thing of giving a common language for teaching and learning. And here I am in Oman. Oh, and that school also attained outstanding in all areas. And I would say that was cited specifically by the inspection team as being due in part to HPL's influence on the quality of the teaching they saw. So, I mean, I knew that it was a tried and trusted formula, if you like, for school improvement. And my current context is very different. We're a CIS school. We're not aiming for a BSO rating. But it's a very complex school. We are a bilingual school, Arabic and English, 50-50. It's a school that's 50 years old, has a very strong culture and history, a very proud history, serving Oman and its citizens. And it's more of a national school, albeit with an international curriculum. And it's actually, again, it's finding that united language that unifies our staff of 27 nationalities. You know, as in Joanna's case, you know, many come from Pakistan, India, UK, Australia, South Africa, all across Europe and even South America. So we have a very our staff are very international, and that's given us a common language for teaching and learning across the school. And we're in the very early stages. We've just sent teachers on the initial conference earlier this year, but they're coming back absolutely passionate about it. And we've got people signing up to be on the Drive team as well. So it's different. It suits different contexts.
So thanks very much, all of you. As you can see, you know, there are different reasons why people decide to adopt HPL, but it can work in many different contexts. And so one of the things I really just wanted to mention to you was, you know, so what is it we're talking about here? What is it we're adopting? Well, HPL really has two very central pieces to it. One is that the competencies that Kendall was talking about, the 30 competencies, are about, they're research-based over a 40-year period, and they show us these are the things that people who are successful cognitively, these are what they can do. And so actually what we really want is for our students to master those, to become comfortable and competent within them. And there are two different kinds. There are the ways of thinking, which we call the ACPs, the Advanced Cognitive Performance Characteristics. And then there's the VAAs, the ways of behaving, things like open-mindedness, empathy, hardworking. So what's different about this is really partly that you're probably doing some of these things already. You may already have in place a teaching and learning framework, but this is, firstly, it's the codification of what we know from research about what makes the difference. So it's very precise and very rigorous. And then secondly, what you really need to do if your students are to have a better chance of achieving highly is they need frequent and regular practice of all of them. So any individual teacher might be doing them, some of the time. But what you need institutionally is to make sure that they become the kind of warp and weft of your school so that students are encountering them all of the time. And this common language, as people have talked about, is really helpful, both from the point of view of bringing teachers together, but also from the point of view of students knowing and understanding what makes a difference in terms of becoming successful themselves, so they can become more independent and take more ownership. And then the second part of what we're talking about here in HPL, which is unique to us, is that based on the research from psychology, neuroscience, and genetics, we genuinely think that everyone that's in your school that you can teach is capable of achieving high levels of performance. And if they're not doing it now, it's just not yet. So what we believe and what HPL schools actually do is they behave all the time as if that is what they're expecting. And if a student isn't there right now, it's just not yet. And actually that underpinning culture is really fundamental to what we're talking about here, because if you want a far larger proportion of your students to achieve highly, they have to believe that they can, and their teachers have to continually signal to them that they can. So that sort of cultural backdrop underpins what we do in HPL. And then the competencies are the things that you're looking to build in order to make that happen. So back to my our team here, because I want to ask them a bit about, so when you got started with this, you know, how did it go down? Because, you know, one of the things that people say to me when they talk to me about HPL is, well, is it going to be extra work for the teachers? Are people going to like it? You know, often the senior leadership team has a really good idea, and that's not necessarily what people in the school kind of think. They just think senior leaders having another bright idea here. Is it going to be worth our while? So I want to ask of the team about how it went down with their people, and also how they introduced it in order to make that happen. So I'm going to go back to you, Joanna, and ask you about how you adopted and how did it go?
We were actually a little bit sneaky, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if I actually told you this, Deborah, but I run a book club every Tuesday after school. And we actually read the Red Book in our book club. So we introduced it to the staff before we actually said that we were going to be an HPL school. So everybody every week was reading a chapter, going away, talking about it, thinking about how that could have an impact within their classroom. And then kind of at the end of it went, surprise, we're going to be an HPL pathway school next term. So we'd introduced it more gradually than that. I'm a little bit sneaky sometimes. So people were aware and they'd all read the book before we introduced it. As in any school, schools are the same around the world. We did have a proportion of people who were going, I do that already. I do that, you know, I know what I'm doing. This is just normal teaching. You're going to get that in any school. But actually what we did was we were very, very fortunate that we had the team came out from HPL in our induction week to start off the programme in the academic year, the start of the academic year. And honestly, David has been fantastic. He's our link for HPL. And I was saying the other week, he's literally become like a member of our family. Everybody knows him. He comes to the school and he feels like he's a member of our team. And he, along with the senior leadership team and knowing the concept of HPL, it was a matter of winning the hearts and minds of everybody. And the big driving force in there, I know we've got Lee here, who's a member of your drive team, Kendall, but the drive team have really worked hard. We specifically chose people who we knew would be able to do that. So we handpicked our drive team to make sure it was people that would be really on board with it. It was the people who really enjoyed reading the book. It was the people who we knew were the integral people in the team that would be able to make it work in our context. And that's what's made it really successful. And I would say the other thing that's been just invaluable for us is because we're in the UAE, we've got other schools down the road that are HPL schools and the doors are open. You know, we've got Denise at the end of the phone. We can contact HPL anytime. We can go online. So if we're struggling with something and thinking we're not quite sure how to introduce that, or we're not, you know, we haven't got any ideas about how to do that, we've either got schools or the internet or the HPL team within the area that can help us with that. So that it's been really, really successful. And as I said before, it's been such a rapid improvement. We've just been, I knew it would happen, but I've been pleasantly surprised at how quickly it has.
Okay, so let's move across to Bucharest, and we've got Kendall and Lee. So maybe we'll start with you, Kendall, but Lee, you might have a different perspective on this. I mean, Joanna was talking about the drive team. That's the team that's the name we give to the group of people that you select within your school to help to bring this into your school, to help you adopt it. And I think the advice is pick your drive team carefully. Because they need to be people who can be influential. And I'm guessing that Lee was probably in the drive team for Kendall, but off you go, Kendall. How was it for you?
Well, actually, our model for the pathway journey was a little bit different than Joanna's. When you sign up to HPL, they provide you with different models, and there are 3 specific models that you can approach. And one of them is to have a drive team. And potentially to work with it within, say, a specific area of school, and then to roll it out further. We opted for the play practice model, and the drive team for us was effectively the SLT. So it was myself, Matthew Tansley as head of secondary, and Alan Cornish as head of primary. So we were the motivators behind the first wave of implementation. We were very passionate about it. We believed in the ideology and the methodology, but we also didn't want to place extra work on our staff. We've always got the temperature gauge, the thermometer out there, gauging workload and the additional effort that's required by implementing new projects. And we were very aware that in many schools, there's a sense of reticence when someone comes in with this new idea of something we're going to do. They think, oh God, here we go. We're going to have to rewrite all our plans. There's going to be many, many extra hours added to our work. And it's not something that people look forward to. So we didn't want to have that initial negative reaction. So we went for the play practice model. We said to the staff, look, this is something in 80%, and maybe we may have been a little bit overly generous with that percentage, but we said, look, 80% of what HPL is something we're already doing. We are a really good school, and we believe in the growth mindset, and we believe in the potential of all our students. I said, but it will give us a common language, and we just want you to play around with it for the first year. I said, look, typically the pathway journey is a 2-year journey to accreditation, but we were very honest right from the outset and said, look, it's not about time. If we get there in 2 years or 3 years, that is not for us the fundamental issue. What is important is that each day we feel like it's a step forward and not 2 steps back. And that was it. So the first year, it really was just the staff learning about the VAAs, the how you behave, and the ACPs, the academic quality and characteristics that we're trying to help the students develop. We didn't say to the staff that they had to work on specific VAAs or ACPs. We said, here they are, learn about them, start to experiment with them in the classroom. And we formed it was something that was aligned to our PLC groups. So we said, well, we'd like you to start working with this, but it wasn't central to PLC groups in the first year. It became more central in the second year. And that was it. We just basically gave it to them, let them go away. We weren't looking over their shoulder or monitoring them very closely. We started to embed HPL within the rhetoric of the school. So we had a weekly piece in the newsletter. Heads of schools started to imbue the language of HPL into our weekly overviews that we were including within the newsletter. We ran a series of webinars for parents because we rolled it out during the COVID period. And in some ways, I think it was well timed for us with COVID, because COVID, we were doing everything new. And I think HPL was something that we could use as a tool to get through the COVID period. And on the other side of COVID, when a lot of schools were suffering with their results, their first set of exam results post-COVID, I think we were probably maybe the only, if not one of the very few schools in Romania where our exam results in the first year after COVID were better than our than our final year of exam results before COVID. And most schools had quite a drop when they went from self-assessed, where they were a little inflated and a bit overly generous, to suddenly UK assessed grades that even though they were still 10% inflated, a lot of schools experienced a drop in grades from the second year of self-assessed to the first year of externally assessed, and it wasn't the case for us. So HPL very much helped us through that journey, and I hopefully Lee will reflect that in saying that he didn't feel there was pressure, but I leave it to Lee because he might say it was an overwhelming amount of work in the worst years of his teaching career.
Lee?
Yeah, I completely disagree with Kendall. No, no, to echo what Kendall was saying, I think the way that we did it with my primary hat on, we just completely revamped our curriculum. We went to a project-based learning. We were completely changing the way we did everything in the classroom on a day-to-day, as well as introducing HPL. And I think the fact that it was just given to us as a broad whole, here's HPL, go play with it, I think that really worked. I think it was the timing more than anything, because of the big changes, the sweeping changes that were going through the primary school specifically at that time as well. It just allowed us to really play around with it, to see what fit where, and it allowed the staff to get used to all of the terminology. And I think, like Kendall mentioned, that any good teaching and learning environment is going to be doing a lot of HPL, whether they're aware of it or not. So it gave us the focus, something explicit, and the real benefit was for the children's point of view, because as staff members, like, we can look at it reflectively and say, oh yeah, this occurred in the lesson and this occurred in the lesson, and that's all well and good, but essentially it's the kids and the students who we're doing this for. So it gave them the opportunity to be able to reflect on the lesson and how they used a specific skill, really showing them how they were able to use a skill in English, maths and science, for example, or in a PE lesson as well as an art lesson, and how those different skills can relate and link across the entire curriculum, especially with our project-based learning that we changed to as well. So I would actually say, I think we were forced a little bit into it because of COVID. with the kind of jump straight in. But I think I would have rather that than kind of drip fed. From my own personal point of view, I thought it just worked really well with what we were doing and where we were at. That might be a case of because of the curriculum overhaul and COVID and everything else, but it just seemed like it just fit really, really well. And also we've got a great staff, and I don't mean to say it's just because he's there, but also a great SLT.
So, I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that kind of comes across that I hope people are kind of picking up is that the HPL kind of framework is robust, but it's also really flexible. So it's up to you whether you go all guns blazing and, you know, kind of really rush through in terms of bringing this in big time, or whether you take your time and go in more slowly. It doesn't really matter. It's about saying that, you know, over time, this is the long-term strategy for developing teaching and learning. So, so Nigel, I don't know whether you want to pick one of your schools to talk about how you brought this in to your school and how it went down, and maybe Panama.
Well, I was actually probably going to talk about Oman actually, because I think we're at the stage where we have just secured the go ahead from the board to proceed with HPL starting next year. So for many of you that are considering HPL, one of the big considerations is, you know, do you have the support of the board? Does it address their needs and perceived concerns? And for us, it was consistency of teaching that was raised as a concern of the board, that when I came here, that they wanted to ensure. And they're a very, I would say, with a small c, they're a very conservative board. They are the Royal Oman Police, so they're all quite. They're not a traditional board. And so to speak their language and say, well, okay, what HPL will do will give us that consistency has been really helpful for them. But I think also it's linking it to the school's vision and mission, and that idea of the school is there to serve Oman. It's there to ensure that we take poor children from the countryside, from the deserts and the mountains, and we have a scholars program, and we get them to become government ministers. It actually talks the same language. So I think it's been setting the groundwork has been really important for us. But also it's that drip. I mean, it's an established school. Many staff have been here 20 plus years, in some cases 30 years. So they're going to be a little bit skeptical about a new educational change. So I've been dripping in our weekly flag ceremony, our flag raising. We talk about it, how it links to the school's vision or the school's mission, the Sultan's initial vision for the school, and that's how we're getting that buy-in. But it's been a very gentle, delicate process with a long-established school.
And I think, you know, that's one of the fascinating things for me. That sort of when I hear schools who have decided to become HPL schools and adopt this, that, you know, the first thing that principals do is we work with you to do a bit of diagnosis about, okay, so where are you? And in terms of where are you now against these ideas and these competencies? And also, you know, kind of, how do you think would be the best way to introduce it in your school? Because we've got lots of experience of working with schools, but they do it very differently, and there's no one right way. And that's part of its strength. Is it's yours. It's HPL in your school. In all three schools here, it looks different from the way it's definitely HPL, but it just manifests itself differently because it has to be melded to your context. I think one of the things that, you know, I think we're most proud of in terms of HPL is the way it gives your students a voice and a much better understanding of what's going on in their learning and their learning journey. And I know that all three of you have kind of experienced that in your own way. So, Joanna, why don't you start? I know that you're a passionate student advocate, as the others are.
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say is, for me, that the biggest thing is that the confidence of the children that I've seen. And sometimes you would have teachers, particularly we have 3 and 4 year olds, and it's quite funny because, you know, the teachers initially were the most reticent, I would say, because they were saying there's no way absolutely no way that our 3 and 4 year olds are going to be able to handle this. Why are you telling me we have to do HPL all the way through the school? I'm telling you, I can go into our lessons with the 3-year-olds and they can talk about linking, they can talk about meta thinking. They did a whole meta thinking week, and they've got huge displays around the room to do with it. And I said to them, do you really understand this? And they were like, yeah. Or I said to them the other week, what are you doing? They went, we're linking. And so the language that they're using at 3 years old as EAL students is just absolutely phenomenal. And again, it goes back to like Lee and Kendall was saying about the growth mindset and the ambition. But my favourite story that Deborah knows is I do you're cracking on with your day and you're busy, and there are so many initiatives that we are doing in schools to try and move schools forward. And every Friday I do something called Picnic with the Principal. And the kids come to my room, they bring their books with them, and I ask them little questions about what you want to do when you grow up. And I said to them, how's the school? And they were like, yeah. And I said, do you feel like school's getting better at the minute? And this little girl who'd been at the school for the last 7 years said, yeah, school's much better now. So I said, tell me why. And I was expecting her to say, I don't know, we do things better, we do more exciting things, we go on trips. And she went, oh, HPL. It's changed my life. HPL has made everything better in the school. And she actually said, I haven't told the staff this, so keep this quiet. I hope this is being recorded. Don't show it to everybody. She said the teachers are teaching better. So it's really interesting to get the feedback of the children, because that's the important thing for me, is we're doing it for the children because they deserve the best. And for me, HPL was a way of bringing that into the school to make sure that our children are getting the best possible education and to believe in themselves, because they didn't. And now I've seen such a huge shift in their mindset, and genuinely that's thanks to HPL.
Well, that's good testimony from your students. It's lovely, isn't it? So
Yeah.
Nigel, Kendall, Lee, do you want to add?
I would agree with what Joanna was saying in terms of the children and their confidence, not just their confidence, but taking ownership of their learning. We have the students reflect at the end of each lesson, whether it via a discussion or a little note to themselves in their notebooks, or sit and quietly reflect themselves, where they look at the HPL kind of display that we have and they think, how did I use which skill, which ACP or which VAA, what have I used today? How did I use that? How did it help me? So I think those small little instances, it's 2 minutes at the end of a lesson, like we mentioned before, it's not overhauling the way that your school or your staff are teaching. It's not creating that extra work that people, I think, initially expect. But it's just having the children really look into themselves and into their learning and how they are using these skills and how these skills can help them in different situations as well. So the confidence and the level of learning that's going on with the students has definitely improved from my perspective.
I think probably for the last 4 or 5 years, there's been an increasing focus on preparing students for the future. We talk about this unknown future, and I think AI makes it even more real than it was, and it was real enough for us. I remember attending a COBIS conference probably 4 or 5 years ago, and they were talking about the 2030 curriculum at that point. And I remember at that time, there was a document published by the UK government on the 2030 curriculum, but the document didn't actually outline the curriculum. It was just talking about the need for a new 2030 curriculum. And at that time, there was a lot of discussion between heads talking about skills-based learning and progressing from a knowledge-based curriculum to a skills-based curriculum. But it was really looking through the trees into the darkness, and no one really had a framework for it. And I think HPL, unbeknown to us, provided us with that framework, because those competencies really are skills-based. And so no matter what you're teaching across the curriculum, what subject it is, what knowledge it is that you're sharing, the underlying notion or the underlying embodiment of the teaching process is those skills. And I think the HPL pedagogy and the HPL approach to teaching and learning more than ever is preparing our children for that unknown future. In 2040, actually, I was talking to an IT company. I had a meeting with an IT company last week, and it was for our work experience program. And they work with, they are an outsourcing company. They work with maybe 20 or 30 different companies, big ones like IBM and Microsoft, big players in the field. And I was talking to them about the statistic and saying that in 2040, 50% of jobs that are done by humans will be done by AI technology. And I'm quite proud that I knew this statistic. I shared it with them. And the CEO looked at me and said, Kendall, it's going to happen a lot sooner than that. And I was like, really? He said, honestly, in the next 5 or 10 years, that we're going to hit that figure in the next 5 to 10 years. And it brings home how important it is to prepare children for this future that is coming towards us so rapidly, more rapidly than I think we are aware of, more rapidly than I think we are prepared for. And I just don't think that there's any curriculum that is better suited and better placed to prepare children for that unknown future than HPL.
Well, that's
I'd
great. Go on, Nigel.
I'd like to add to that. I mean, I think that the student voice element is really important here. And one thing that I got out of HPL and my community got out of HPL in Panama, which had suffered really badly. I mean, the school was closed for 1.5 years due to COVID. Was the link to the school's initiatives with wellbeing and student wellbeing. The fact that the VAAs explicitly led to a conversation about, what it is, what are the 21st century skills? How can we prepare for the future and with the challenges we face? Actually had a good impact on student wellbeing because it gave them a framework to actually move forward in terms of self-regulation, in terms of big picture thinking. And I think it actually generated a whole sort of generation of student activists, really. I mean, if you take on HPL in your school, you will be prepared for students that will become real enthusiasts at all ages. Not, as Joanna said, they can be lower primary or they can be sixth formers and doing IB. That they really are motivated by this. You'll be pushing an open door.
And I think I think that's one of the sort of interesting things about HPL, because just to take you back to what I said before, which is this is the codification of what we know about how the most successful people think and learn. So most of you will have a vision which says, that we want this kind of student that can thrive in this fast changing world that Kendall was talking about. But you need a mechanism to make that happen. And you've got some of that mechanism, but this is more precise, it's more rigorous, and it absolutely makes you, it brings complete clarity around, both from the teaching perspective and the student perspective, about the things that you need to bring more to the fore in order to do well. And as Nigel says, one of the consequences is your students do develop a point of view because they're able to express it. So one of the things we know from the data that we collect is that students who've been educated in HPL schools are very attractive to universities and other post-school destinations, because not only are they achieving highly, but they can talk about what they're doing and understand it and be compelling. And that's part of preparing for this life that Kendall's talking about, where they have to thrive in the world of the unexpected. The unexpected just has to be an interesting new challenge, not I didn't do it, I don't know how to do it. You've just got to get a different mindset in order to thrive in that sort of space. So I'm going to just ask one sort of more round here and just ask a little bit about, you talk quite a lot about this. If there was a sort of one thing you wanted to share with people that's either a favourite thing of yours about HPL or something you wouldn't want these people to go away with without thinking about, what would it be that you would choose? So who would like to start?
I can start. That's fine. I think this is something that came out of a conversation actually with Joanna and Nigel, in that, looking at our different contexts, the idea that HPL can fit into every situation. And it's not something that you pick up and it's a one size fits all. It's a framework where you apply it rigidly exactly the way that that framework is. It requires a high degree of contextualization, but in a way that generates meaningful conversation with staff. And it really, for me, it gives us a sense of direction. Like as a head of school, sometimes you feel the overwhelming pressure that you have to stand on the bow of the boat and always know where it's going, and be shouting out to the team, it's this way. Absolutely, this is the way we're going. And sometimes, a head's worst nightmare, the reoccurring nightmare that we have is what happens if I run out of ideas? What happens if I don't know what is next? And I come to the end of it. Is that the time that I leave my school and move on to a new school? I don't think HPL has an end to the road. I just feel like, every time you move forward, the horizon continues to extend in front of you. And I've never had to think about what is next. It always seems like there's so much to do, but in a positive, not in an overwhelming way, but in a positive way that you feel like you're looking forward to engaging in that work. So that's it. I think HPL in a way is a school development plan that is pre-made, that almost writes itself. And that's a relief for a head of school.
Nigel?
Yeah, there's so much. Yeah, totally agree with you there. And I think that for me, it actually creates, it's a shaper of culture. Being an HPL school, whatever stage you're at, you are seeing a culture change for the better. Teachers talk about teaching. Children are talking about how they're learning. More leaders emerge because there is that collaborative collective work of the school, and I think it's a unifying force of a school. As you say, it's a development plan, Kendall. I think it supplements the vision and mission of many of our schools, and actually enables us to actually live that vision and mission very explicitly and intentionally. And I think that really is transformative.
Joanna?
Yeah, I totally agree with absolutely everything you've said, and I'm going to widen it out a little bit, if that's okay with you, and say that for us it's the culture of the whole school community, because the parents are involved as well. So we have parent coffee mornings about HPL. We regularly send things home in the newsletter, like you said, Kendall. So our parents are speaking the same language as well. So our entire school community, the students, the teachers, the parents, it's had a real culture shift for everybody because everybody's involved. And just as an aside, I mean, I love everything to do with HPL. This is as an aside of the impact that it's had in terms of teacher recruitment, for teachers wanting to come to the school. So, we're in a global teaching crisis for recruitment. It's attractive to schools. So we have HPL on our advertisements, and we have teachers who apply because they want to come and work in an HPL school. It looks really good. And as somebody in the UAE as well, I was talking to ADEC. So, we're all in we're based in the UAE. So for anybody else who's here, ADEC's framework is the same for the whole of the UAE. And I was talking to somebody in ADEC yesterday, and she was saying, oh my goodness, that's great, because everything that HPL does fits in perfectly into their inspection framework. So again, that was just an added bonus that I hadn't even thought of, that, it's making the inspection body that comes into our schools happy that we've become an HPL school. And so, that's just another, the whole school community, whether it's from the government, parents, students, teachers, it's been a fantastic thing.
Lee, do you want to say anything?
I think I'd echo everything that has been mentioned in regards to the culture of the school and the fact that it's the parents, students, staff, everybody involved. I think the big thing for it for me is it gives a label to everything. So for example, we know what good teaching and learning is, and like Kendall mentioned about preparing students for a future world that we don't yet know, and how what would that look like? What is that? There's all these kind of big ideas out there, but I think HPL gives you the labels or the kind of framework to build and work from that. In a side note as well, I mean, the culture is the biggest thing for me, definitely. But I don't want to just repeat what others have said. So in addition to that, having the support and the availability of all of the other schools worldwide who have been so open and willing to share practices. We've shared practices with other schools. We've had meetings on Zoom. We've planned trips and visits to other schools. We've invited schools to ourselves as well. So just the huge kind of network of learning and sharing of good practice that goes on as well. So you can see what goes on in another school. It's not always going to fit perfectly with your school, but you can see how it does fit within the context of your own school. Tweak and amend, or take an idea and elevate it, or take an idea and trim it down to something that really suits your school, or whatever it is that's in the kind of shared vision for your school. So I think that alongside having a great culture, you get to see all these other great cultures from around the world, from different types of schools, different countries, which can only be good in my opinion.
Nigel, did you want to add?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it as an IB school, I mean, it blends really well with the IB learner profile, and I've always found that really helpful. It actually strengthens the IB learner profile because there's so much of an overlap between the VAAs and the ACPs that are part of HPL. But also, I think you're right, Lee. I think that diversity of schools is something. It's really wonderful to be able to share good practice with public school systems, with for-profit schools, not-for-profit schools across different continents. I can't overemphasize how beneficial that is to our teachers and our learners.
I think that's one of the things, you know, that we really like, you know, the fact that all four of you are here today, 3 schools, 4 people, and giving your time kind of generously. It's just so typical of the HPL community. It's kind of like we're all on a mission to try to get closer to that elusive idea that every single child could be a high performer. You know, whatever stage of that journey you're on, you're looking for the kind of next step, and there are many other schools that are also on that same quest, who are just so keen and willing to share what they've done. So, you know, if you're showing an interest in a particular topic, there's bound to be some other HPL school somewhere in the world that's had a look at that topic and are just really interested in it. And sometimes just the diversity is fascinating. Like, you know, in terms of working with parents, if you're working with parents from many different cultures in many different parts of the world, some things are common and some things are definitely very different in different places, and that's kind of part of the joy of it. Joanna mentioned the whole kind of question of inspection frameworks and the way in which HPL is usually looked on very benignly by inspection frameworks. I mean, why wouldn't it? It's just about improving the quality of teaching and learning. But I also, before we finish today, I wanted to just pick up on another item which comes up a lot when schools are talking about potentially adopting HPL. So Joanna mentioned about teacher recruitment and retention. We statistically have gathered the data around this, a 25% better retention rate in HPL schools. People like working this way, they want to stay there. As Joanna said, you know, it's more difficult to provide statistical data about this, but the feedback from our schools is that teachers want to come because this is a school which is signalling to them that their core business of teaching and learning is right at its heart. And in these days when, you know, it's a competitive market for getting really good teaching talent, I wouldn't underestimate that. You know, we have lots of schools within the community talking about how they use that in the recruitment process in different kinds of ways. But the final thing I just wanted to ask you very quickly for a quick comment on is that people often ask me about this kind of question of, you know, will HPL help me to position my school in a competitive market? Because pretty much everybody is in a competitive market to a greater or lesser degree, and you want something that makes you stand out. So do you think that that's helpful for you? Who would like to start?
Yeah. I'm happy to take a lead on this. It's clearly been a good move for us in terms of marketing. I would never want to denigrate HPL to something that was a marketing tool, but it's very helpful that it has successfully helped us to differentiate from the rest of the market. We are currently the only HPL school in Bucharest, and we are currently the only HPL school in Romania, and that's a real niche for us that we're able to market that way. I don't think it'll be an issue for us when other HPL schools enter the market within Romania, but it's certainly enabled us to weather the storms and to differentiate. And I mean, I can clarify that in terms of, the financial terms. We've increased our fees from 15,000 pre-HPL to 21,000, and we have 21,000 per student. That's for years 10 through 13, a little bit less for the students below. But we have more demand now with that significant, over a 30% increase in fees, and we have more demand now than we did pre-HPL. In fact, all of our classes in primary, except 2, are full with waiting lists. And it's the same. We have all of our classes, every single class in secondary is full, except 2 years, I think 7 and 9, have a limited number of places, and probably by August, they'll be full as well. So we've been able to increase fees, and the demand has increased, and it continues to be that case. It's just the numbers are going up and up and up. Can we increase our fees again? Probably. But it certainly helped us with our school development plan, because that fees, it's our only source of funding, and that's enabled us to grow exponentially. The number of buildings and the facilities we've increased, it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. It feeds into itself, and fees go up. We provide better fees, better resources and facilities. The demand increases, and it seems like the sky is the limit for us right now. The board obviously very happy. Staff are very happy as well, because they have better facilities to offer the students, and the general pride of the school continues to increase, because everyone feels more and more this is the best school in Romania. So it's been really successful for us.
Well, that's really helpful, Kendall, because I know people here, if you're thinking about adopting HPL, you will have to convince your owners, board, governors, whatever, and they want a return on investment. So whilst we as educators are very interested in how this is playing out for their students, and they of course are interested in that too, they want a return on investment. So is there anything you want to add to that, Nigel?
Yeah, I just think from a marketing perspective, I think it's really interesting, because I think good marketing should have substance. I think that there are lots of schools that do marketing really well, but HPL gives you a language, and it gives you something really meaty to talk about in terms of education, and I think that really helps. That really helps the cause of the school. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to change our fees. They're set by the government. But were that the case, I would love to put our fees up. But I think actually at the same time, I think HPL gives your school a sense of quality, and it's a school that is clearly focused not just on the profit, but on the quality of teaching and learning. And I think that is a message that always goes down well and leads to a successful outcome.
Joanna?
Yeah, and for me, I would say that as I explained at the start, our context is vastly different. We're not an outstanding school. We haven't got huge waiting lists, but statistically and genuinely, the first year that I arrived at the school, about 400, there were 800 children in the school, and 400 left at the start. Wow. before I arrived. And then it's quite a fluid market here, so there were 300 new students, but the school had hovered around 800, and then 200 would leave, 170 would come for the years that the school had been open. So this last academic year, we preempted everybody. We prepared them that we were going to be an HPL school. We'd done all of this in terms of the marketing of the school and speaking to our parents, and the owner of our school is ecstatic, because for the first year ever, the school has broken even, because we got over 1,000 students. So we've gone from losing, gaining, to going over his magic number of 1,000, and we've retained them statistically for this year. So normally, like I say, there will be 300 or 400 kids leaving the school year on year, and this year I think we're at 39 children are leaving, and we've
Wow.
already got 95 new ones coming, and a lot of that is down to HPL.
Great.
So I guess, you know, as we congratulations on that, all three of you. And as we kind of wrap this up, and I say thank you to you for your time, I just want to say to the people who are kind of listening to this, HPL is not a silver bullet. It's just what we know makes the difference in teaching and learning. So if you focus harder on the things that matter, it's just the same as if you focus hard on eating the right foods in order to become healthy, you become healthier. So it's about focusing on the things that really matter and doing them very deliberately and very precisely over time. And you get a cumulative effect. So you get an immediate effect, but as Kendall has so eloquently said, as you develop this over the longer term, it provides you with a very long-term strategy for teaching and learning. So we will follow up with all of you individually by email, and very much would like to have a one-to-one conversation with you if you are interested, just to talk more about your school and your context. But meanwhile, I'm sure you'll join me in saying my thank you to Lee, to Nigel, to Joanna, and to Kendall for your brilliant input today. You know, these kinds of ideas, I could talk about it forever, but other people will always say, well, she would say that, wouldn't she? You're the people who are doing it day to day, and it's just a joy to hear you talk about it in the way that you have. So thank you so much, everyone.